A word of advance warning here. Today's reading from Esther contains one of those passages that turn many people off to the Old Testament, and even leads some Christians to say, I don't believe in the God of the Old Testament. But as you know, I believe strongly that literature is time-bound, and what reads as a hero's tale to one generation reads as depraved bloodlust to another. There's even a term for it, presentism. It's the idea that we in the present cast judgment on the past through the lens of our present moral values. It also has some other meanings, but that's for another day. So, with that warning, let's read what happens on the day that Haman had set for the destruction of the Jews. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas. Recall that the threat to the Jews in this story was the decree by the evil Haman that on the 13th day of the 12th month, Adar, all the Jews living in the provinces of the far-flung Persian Empire were to be slaughtered. All this because Haman suffered a bit of pique that Mordecai would not bow down to him. Then, through a series of events, some planned and some serendipitous, fortunes are reversed. Haman, who had planned to hang Mordecai, ends up himself being hanged on the very gallows he had constructed to hang Mordecai. Haman's home is given to Queen Esther, herself a Jew, and Haman's office as chief administrative officer to the king goes to Mordecai. Then, with the king's blessing, Mordecai issues a royal decree reversing Haman's earlier decree. Mordecai decrees that on the very same day Haman had set for the destruction of the Jews were then empowered to seek out those who had intended them harm. Now we come to that day. Now in the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, on the 13th day, when the king's command and edict were about to be executed, on the very day when the enemies of the Jews hoped to gain power over them, but which had been changed to a day when the Jews would gain power over their foes, the Jews gathered in their cities throughout all the provinces of King Ahasuerus to lay hands on those who had sought their ruin. And no one could withstand them, because the fear of them had fallen upon all peoples. All the officials of the provinces, the satraps and the governors and the royal officials, were supporting the Jews, because the fear of Mordecai had fallen upon them. For Mordecai was powerful in the king's house, and his fame spread throughout all the provinces as the man Mordecai grew more and more powerful. So the Jews struck down all their enemies with the sword, slaughtering and destroying them, and did as they pleased to those who hated them. In the citadel of Susa, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 people. They killed Parsamdatha, Dalthan, Aspatha, Poratha, Adalia, Aradatha, Parmashta, Arisai, Aridai, Bazitha, and the 10 sons of Haman, son of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews. But they did not touch the plunder. Okay, I get it. Lauding the act of the Jews striking down their enemies with the sword, slaughtering and destroying them, seems a bit over the top. But in the context of this particular story, it actually completes the sudden and unexpected reversal of fortune, or to use the technical term for it, the Peripeteia, in which everything that had been set up to exterminate Mordecai and the Jews came back on those who had planned this great evil. Call it poetic justice. But there is one little detail easily overlooked here that is, in fact, noteworthy. The very end of the passage notes specifically that although the Jews took revenge on their enemies, they did not touch their plunder. Yesterday, recall, I noted that in Mordecai's decree, the Jews were specifically authorized to plunder their enemies, but in this passage, and in fact twice more later in this same chapter, the writer is clear that there was no plundering. Interesting. Why? I suspect it's because this isn't about the Jews enriching themselves at someone else's expense. It's about the Jews defending themselves and prevailing against the very people who meant to do them in. In an odd sort of way, it's meant to demonstrate the righteousness of their cause, unsullied from vulgar greed. And with that, the great reversal is complete. What comes next is the tradition of celebration that continues down to this very day. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.